The call came at 2 a.m. My mother didn't ask if I was okay. She demanded 20 grand to save my brother. I refused and hung up. I didn't know that my refusal would trigger a police investigation, exposing their darkest secret to the world. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The glowing numbers on my bedside clock read 2:14 a.m. when the phone began to vibrate against the nightstand. It wasn't a gentle hum. It was an angry, persistent buzzing that rattled the wood and drilled straight into my skull. I groaned, burying my face into the pillow. My head was already pounding before the noise started. I had been fighting a brutal flu for 3 days, my body alternating between shivering chills and feverish sweats. Every joint in my body felt like it had been welded shut with rust. Beside me, Christopher stirred. He let out a low, sleepy murmur, shifting his weight but not waking up. I envied him. I reached out a trembling hand, my fingers fumbling blindly until I grasped the cold metal of the smartphone. I squinted against the harsh blue light of the screen. "Mom." My stomach dropped. It wasn't the drop of excitement or love. It was the visceral, conditioned drop of dread I had developed over 3 decades. Patricia didn't call at 2 a.m. to say hello. She didn't call to ask if my fever had broken. Patricia only called at this hour when the world was ending, or more specifically, when Ryan's world was ending. I slid the icon to answer and pressed the phone to my ear, my voice raspy and weak. "Hello." "Megan, thank God, you picked up. I called 3 times. Why didn't you pick up?" Her voice was high-pitched, lacerated with panic, but underscored by that familiar tone of accusation. She wasn't relieved I was there. She was annoyed I hadn't been there sooner. "I'm sick, Mom," I croaked, closing my eyes. "I have the flu. What is happening?" "It's Ryan," she practically screamed into the receiver. "They took him, Megan. The police. They came to the apartment and they took him away in handcuffs like he was some kind of criminal." I rubbed my temples, trying to process the information through the fog of my fever. "Okay, slow down. Why did they take him?" "It's all a misunderstanding. You know how jealous people get of your brother. He was just trying to facilitate a business deal and... Look, it doesn't matter. They're holding him. The bail is set high and we need a lawyer immediately. A good one, not a public defender." "Okay," I said, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "We need $20,000, Megan. Tonight, right now. I need you to wire it to the account I'm going to text you. It's for the retainer and the bail bondsman." I sat up in bed, the room spinning slightly. The audacity was breathtaking, even for her. 20,000? Mom, I don't keep $20,000 in a checking account I can just access at 2 a.m., and even if I did. "Don't lie to me," she snapped, the panic shifting instantly to rage. "I know you and Christopher have money. I know you just got that bonus. You're always bragging about your job." I had never bragged. I had simply mentioned once, 6 months ago, that I had been promoted to senior forensic accountant at my firm. To her, that translated to unlimited resources for Ryan. "I'm not doing this," I whispered, the soreness in my throat making it painful to speak. "I am not bailing him out again. Remember the DUI? Remember the investment in the crypto scheme? I'm still paying off the credit card you begged me to use for that." "This is your brother," she wailed. "My baby boy is in a cell. How can you be so cold? He's scared, Megan. He's crying. He needs his big sister." That was the trigger. He needs his big sister. For my entire life, my role had been defined not by who I was, but by what I could provide for Ryan. I was the safety net, the bank, the fixer. He was the golden statue, and I was the pedestal, expected to bear the weight without complaint. "If he's in a cell," I said, my voice gaining a sudden, steely edge despite the fever, "then maybe he needs to sit there and think about why." "If you don't send the money," Patricia hissed, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper, "they are going to take everything. They're talking about seizing assets. If you don't help us, Megan, I will never forgive you. Do you hear me? Never." I looked over at Christopher, sleeping peacefully. He was a good man, a kind man. He worked hard as a structural engineer, and we were saving that money for a house for a future, not for Ryan's mistakes. Then don't, I said. There was a stunned silence on the other end. What? Don't forgive me, I said, tears of exhaustion pricking my eyes. Call the son you always put first. Ask him to fix it. Oh, wait, he's the one who broke it. Megan, don't you dare. Goodbye, Mom. I tapped the red button, ending the call. I didn't just hang up. I powered the phone off completely and tossed it onto the nightstand. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I lay back down, shaking, the adrenaline mixing poorly with the fever. I felt sick, physically and emotionally. But as I stared at the ceiling, trying to calm my breathing, I realized something. The betrayal wasn't that she had asked for money. The betrayal was that she was willing to bankrupt me without a second thought to save him from consequences he had earned. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I drifted in and out of a feverish delirium, haunted by the phantom sound of my phone ringing. Every time the house settled or the wind rattled the window pane, I flinched, expecting Patricia to be standing at my bedroom door, demanding checkbooks and PIN codes. When the sun finally crept through the blinds, painting the room in stripes of pale gray, I felt like I had run a marathon. Christopher was already up. I could smell coffee and hear the faint sounds of him moving around in the kitchen. I sat up, the room tilting dangerously. I needed water. I needed aspirin. And against my better judgment, I needed to check my phone. I powered it on. The screen flooded with notifications instantly. 14 missed calls from Mom, 6 missed calls from Ryan Collect, 22 text messages. I didn't read them. I couldn't. I knew what they would say. Variations of "how could you," selfish, family comes first, and likely a few vague threats about being disowned, which, at this point, felt more like a promise of liberation than a punishment. I shuffled into the kitchen, wrapping my robe tight around myself. Christopher looked up from his tablet, his face falling when he saw me. "Hey," he said softly, standing up immediately to guide me to a chair. "You look rough, Meg, fever still high." "I think it broke," I lied, accepting the mug of tea he offered. "Mom called last night." Christopher sighed, his jaw tightening. He knew the history, he knew the scars. "Let me guess. Ryan needs money." 20,000, I said, blowing on the steam. Christopher choked on his coffee. 20, for what? Did he accidentally buy a car? Bail lawyer, she said the police took him. And you said no. I said no. Christopher reached out and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you. I know how hard that is." "She said they were going to take everything if I didn't help," I murmured, staring into the dark liquid. It was just so desperate, more than usual. My phone, sitting on the table, lit up again. It wasn't Patricia this time. It wasn't Ryan. It was an unknown number. A local area code, but not one I had saved. "Don't answer it," Christopher said. "It's probably her using a neighbor's phone." I stared at the screen. Something in my gut, a professional instinct honed by years of sniffing out fraud and deception in corporate ledgers, told me this wasn't Patricia. Patricia would have blocked her number to trick me, or she would be texting furiously. This was a steady, single call. I picked it up. "Hello. Is this Megan Vance?" A male voice. Deep, authoritative, but not aggressive. "Yes, this is she." "Ms. Vance, this is Detective Miller with the Economic Crimes Unit. I'm calling regarding your brother, Ryan Vance, and your mother, Patricia Vance." My blood ran cold. Economic crimes? That wasn't a DUI. That wasn't a bar fight. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. "What about them?" "We have your brother in custody, as you may know. We are currently executing a search warrant at his residence. Your name has come up in some of the documentation we've recovered." I froze. My name, in what context? "I can't discuss specifics over the phone, Ms. Vance." But we found several loan applications and business incorporation documents listed under a Megan Vance as a guarantor and primary partner. We need you to come down to the station to clarify your involvement. The room seemed to suck all the air out of the space. I looked at Christopher, my eyes wide with terror. Am I in trouble? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. That depends, Ms. Vance, the detective said, his tone neutral but heavy. If you sign these papers, then yes, you are looking at significant liability. If you didn't, well, then you're a victim of identity theft, but we need to verify that immediately. I didn't sign anything, I said firmly. I haven't signed anything for Ryan in 10 years. Then we need you here, today. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking so hard I nearly dropped it into my tea. Megan, Christopher asked, his face pale, what is it? It's not just bail, I whispered. Ryan committed fraud, and apparently according to the paperwork, so did I. Christopher swore loudly. They used your name. They used my N. Aim. I stood up, the dizziness vanishing, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The fever was still there, lurking in my joints, but my mind had snapped into focus. This was no longer a family squabble. This was war. I walked to the bedroom to get dressed. As I pulled on my slacks, I thought about Patricia's threat from the night before. We need $20,000 right now, or they'll take everything. She hadn't been trying to save Ryan from jail. She had been trying to buy time to cover their tracks before the police looked too closely at the partner listed on the documents. She wanted my money to pay off the debt she had incurred in my name. I buttoned my blouse, staring at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed, my skin pale, but my expression was hard. They thought they were clever. They thought they could forge a few signatures and guilt-trip me into paying the bill when it came due. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten that I investigate financial fraud for a living. I don't just find the money, I find the bodies buried under it. The drive to the precinct was a blur of gray concrete and red taillights. Christopher drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, while I sat in the passenger seat with my laptop open, already pulling credit reports and background checks on myself. I needed to see the damage before the police showed it to me. As the data populated on my screen, a wave of nausea rolled over me that had nothing to do with the flu. There were 3 credit cards opened in the last 6 months. A business loan for a consulting firm called Vance Ventures, a leased luxury SUV. Total outstanding debt, $84,000. I'm going to kill him, I whispered. I am actually going to kill him. We're going to let the law do that, Christopher said firmly. We are going in there, we are telling the truth, and we are pressing charges. No mercy, Megan, not this time. No mercy, I repeated, but it was harder than it sounded. I closed my eyes and memories washed over me. I remembered Ryan when he was 6, scraping his knee and crying for me, not Mom. I remembered buying him his first suit for an interview when Mom couldn't afford it. I remembered the years of sacrifices, skipping my own prom to babysit him so Mom could work, taking out student loans so the family fund could go toward his hockey camps. I had loved him. I really had. I had spent my entire 20s trying to parent him because Patricia was too busy trying to be his best friend. Patricia. She was the architect of this. Ryan was lazy and entitled, yes, but he wasn't smart enough to forge tax returns or incorporate a shell company. That had Patricia written all over it. She had been a paralegal in the 80s. She knew just enough of the system to be dangerous, but not enough to be competent. We pulled up to the station. As we walked toward the entrance, I saw her. Patricia was standing on the precinct steps, smoking a cigarette with a frantic, twitchy energy. She was wearing her victim costume, an oversized cardigan that made her look frail, no makeup, hair slightly askew. But I saw the way her eyes darted around, calculating, assessing. She spotted us and immediately threw her cigarette to the ground, stomping it out as she rushed over. Megan, oh, thank God. She reached out as if to hug me, but Christopher stepped in front of me, his chest acting as a shield. "Back up, Patricia," he said, his voice low and dangerous. She stopped, looking affronted. "Christopher, this is a family matter. I need to speak to my daughter." "You lost the right to call her family when you stole her identity," Christopher said. Patricia's face crumpled, tears springing to her eyes on command. "I didn't steal anything. It was a loan. We were going to pay it back. Ryan's business is just about to take off. We just had a cash flow problem. We did it for us, Megan, for the family success." I stepped out from behind Christopher. The fever made me feel detached, like I was watching this scene from a distance. "For us?" I asked. "You forged my signature, Mom. That's a felony, multiple felonies." "It was a formality," she hissed, dropping the frail act. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "You have excellent credit. Ryan had some trouble. We just borrowed your credibility for a few months. If you had just sent the $20,000 last night, we could have paid off the vendor who went to the cops, and none of this would be happening. This is your fault, Megan. You let this happen." There it was, the twist, the mental gymnastics required to blame the victim. In Patricia's world, the crime wasn't the fraud, the crime was getting caught. "You really believe that, don't you?" I asked, genuinely fascinated by her delusion. "Ryan is sitting in a cell because of you," she spat. "He's delicate, Megan. He can't handle that environment. If you go in there and tell that detective that you authorized those loans, that you just forgot, or we add a verbal agreement, they'll let him go. It becomes a civil matter. You can save him." She reached out and grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in. "Just tell them you knew. Please, I'll pay you back, I swear. Just say you knew." I looked at her hand on my arm. Her manicured nails, the gold bracelet I had bought her for her 60th birthday. She looked polished, well-kept. She looked like a woman who had never sacrificed a comfort in her life because she had always simply taken what she needed from me. I pulled my arm away. "I'm going inside, Mom," I said. "To tell them you authorized it?" she asked, hope flaring in her eyes. "To give them the original copies of my signature to compare against your forgeries," I said. Patricia's face went slack. Then it hardened into something ugly. Something I had seen only a few times before, when her mask slipped completely. "You ungrateful little bitch," she whispered. "After everything I did for you, I raised you, I put a roof over your head." "You raised a bank account," I corrected her, "and the account is closed." I turned and walked up the steps, Christopher's hand warm on the small of my back. "You'll regret this," she screamed after us, causing a passing officer to turn his head. "You'll destroy this family." I didn't look back. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the precinct, the cool air conditioning hitting my flushed face. I was sick, I was exhausted, and I was heartbroken. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't confused. The antagonist of my life wasn't bad luck. It wasn't the economy. It wasn't Ryan's incompetence. It was the woman screaming on the sidewalk. And I was about to introduce her to the only authority figure she couldn't manipulate, the penal code. The interview room was exactly as I had seen on television, sterile, cold, and smelling faintly of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Detective Miller sat across from me, a thick manila folder between us. The table was metal, bolted to the floor, vibrating slightly from the hum of the air conditioning. "I need you to look at this, Ms. Vance," Miller said, sliding a document across the steel surface. I looked down. It was a loan application for a $45,000 line of credit from a regional bank. At the bottom, in blue ink, was my signature. Megan Elizabeth Vance. It wasn't just a scribble. It was an artful replication. The slant of the M, the loop of the G, it was terrifyingly close to how I signed my name. If I had been a teller glancing at a driver's license, I would have accepted it without hesitation. "It's good," I said, my voice flat. "But look at the E. I loop my E's tightly. This one is open, and the pressure points are wrong. Whoever signed this is left-handed. I'm right-handed." Miller raised an eyebrow. "You can tell the handedness from a photocopy." "I'm a forensic accountant detective," I said, lifting my gaze to meet his. I spend 40 hours a week looking for inconsistencies in financial records. I track embezzlement for Fortune 500 companies. This signature? It's a forgery, but it's a practiced one. Someone spent hours tracing my handwriting to get this right. Miller leaned back, crossing his arms. Your mother is left-handed, isn't she? I felt a sharp pang in my chest, a physical ache. Yes, she is. We have video footage from the bank, Miller said, his tone softening slightly. It shows a woman matching your mother's description entering the branch with a young man matching your brother. They sat with a loan officer for 40 minutes. They presented identification. What identification? I asked. I have my passport and my license. Miller sighed and opened the folder again, pulling out a grainy photocopy of a driver's license. It had my name, my address, my date of birth. But the photo, it was an old photo of me, one I had lost years ago, superimposed onto the card. Fake ID, I whispered. She made a fake ID. Ms. Vance, this is extensive, Miller said gravely. This isn't just one loan. We're looking at credit cards, vehicle leases, and small business loans totaling nearly 6 figures. They've been building this house of cards for 8 months. The only reason it collapsed is that your brother tried to cash a fraudulent check at a casino, and the system flagged him. 8 months. For 8 months, while I was visiting for Sunday dinners, while I was buying mom groceries because she was short on cash, while I was listening to Ryan talk about his big break, they had been actively stealing my life. I want to press charges, I said. The words tasted like ash, but I forced them out. Identity theft, fraud, forgery, all of it. Miller nodded. We'll need a formal statement. And Ms. Vance, you need to lock down everything. If they have your social security number and a fake ID, they can do a lot of damage very quickly. I know, I said. I'm going to do more than lock it down. I'm going to find out where the money went. I left. The station 2 hours later, drained but running on a reserve tank of pure, cold rage. Christopher was waiting in the car, the engine running. How was it? He asked, his eyes scanning my face for cracks. Worse than we thought, I said, buckling my seatbelt. Take me home, I have work to do. When we got back to the apartment, I didn't go to bed, despite the flu still making my limbs feel heavy. I went straight to my home office, a small second bedroom we had converted. I turned on my 3 monitors, the glow illuminating the dark room like a command center. Coffee? Christopher asked from the doorway. Water, I said, cracking my knuckles. And maybe a sandwich. I'm not leaving this chair until I map the entire flow of funds. I started with my credit reports. I called the fraud departments of every major bureau. I placed freezes. Then, I began the digital excavation. Because of my profession, I had access to skip tracing software and public record databases that the average person didn't. I pulled the incorporation documents for Vance Ventures. It was registered to a PO box in a strip mall 3 towns over. The registered agent was Ryan Vance, but the silent partner listed on the operating agreement was me. I dug deeper. I found the bank account associated with the business. I couldn't access the statements directly without a subpoena, but I could see the vendor links through public lien filings. Ryan hadn't been investing in a business. I traced a series of payments to a company called Lux Auto Leasing, another to Prestige Travel, and then the smoking gun, multiple large transactions to an online betting platform based in Malta. They hadn't just stolen the money to survive. They hadn't used it for rent or food. They had blown $84,000 on leased cars, vacations, and online gambling. I sat back in my chair, staring at the spreadsheet I had created. The columns of numbers blurred into a portrait of my family's disdain for me. I wasn't a person to them. I was a resource. I was a vein of gold they had mined until the tunnel collapsed. My phone rang. It was a blocked number. I stared at it. I knew who it was, Patricia. I picked it up. This call is being recorded, I lied smoothly. Go ahead. Megan, stop this madness. Patricia's voice wasn't weepy anymore. It was strident, commanding. "The detective told Ryan's public defender that you're claiming fraud. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You are sending your brother to prison." "I'm not sending him anywhere, Mom," I said, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with her hysteria. "He sent himself there when he forged my name on a business loan, and you helped him." "I did no such thing," she screeched. "I didn't sign anything. Ryan told me he had your permission. I was just a witness." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Stop lying. Detective Miller has the video, Mom. He saw you. You're left-handed. The signature is left-handed, and I know about the fake ID." There was a pause. A thick, heavy silence where I could hear her breathing, the gears in her head grinding as she tried to pivot. "We had to, Megan," she said, her voice dropping to that manipulative, confidential whisper. "You have so much, you and Christopher. You have the nice apartment, the good jobs. Ryan has nothing. He just needed a start. We were going to pay it back before you even noticed. It was a victimless crime." "Victimless?" I slammed my hand onto my desk, startling Christopher, who was bringing in a plate of toast. "You tanked my credit score. You put me $84,000 in debt. I could lose my license, Mom. If my firm finds out I'm involved in fraud, even as a victim, I could be suspended pending an investigation. You risked my entire career so Ryan could play poker." "Poker?" She feigned confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about. It was for business equipment." "I know about the Malta account, Mom." I cut her off. "I know about the $12,000 wire transfer to the betting site on November 14th. I know about the weekend trip to Cabo in December that you told me was a friend's retreat. You paid for that with my credit card." You can't know that," she stammered. The confidence was cracking. "I do know. I'm looking at the ledger right now. I'm a forensic accountant, Mom. Did you forget that? Did you really think you could hide a paper trail from me? I track money for a living. And I have tracked every single cent you stole." "You're bluffing," she hissed. "You can't see those accounts." "I can see enough to know that Detective Miller will be very interested in the wire fraud charges associated with international gambling transfers," I said. "That's federal, Mom. That's not county jail. That's federal prison." "You wouldn't," she gasped. "I'm your mother." "Then start acting like it," I shouted, the control finally slipping. "A mother protects her child. She doesn't use her daughter as a sacrificial lamb for her son. You have spent 30 years telling me I need to be the bigger person, that I need to take care of Ryan. Well, I'm done. I am burning the bridge, Mom, and I'm standing on the other side with a match. If you do this," she threatened, her voice shaking with rage, "I will tell everyone. I will tell the family that you abandoned us, that you're a greedy, heartless bitch who let her brother rot." "Go ahead," I said. "Tell them. But make sure you tell them about the fake ID and the gambling debt, too. Because when this goes to court, it's all becoming public record." "I'm coming over," she announced suddenly. "We are going to settle this face to face. I am not letting you destroy this family over money." "If you come to my building," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm, "I will have security have you arrested for trespassing. Christopher has already alerted the concierge. Do not come here. You can't keep me away. I gave birth to you. Goodbye, Patricia." I hung up again. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From the adrenaline of finally saying the words I had swallowed for decades. "She's coming," Christopher asked, his face grim. "She threatened to," I said. "But she won't. She's a coward. She only fights when she thinks she has the upper hand. I just took it away." "You did good," Christopher said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "But you know she's not going to stop. She's going to try to find another way to hurt you." "I know," I said, turning back to my screens. "That's why I need to find the rest of it. There's something missing. Ryan's gambling debt explains a lot, but not everything. There's a $15,000 gap in the funds that didn't go to the casino or the cars. It went to a shell entity I can't identify yet. Another scam. Or blackmail," I mused. "Or another debt. If I can find out who else they owe, I can prove motive for the fraud beyond just business mistakes." I began typing again, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The fever was gone, burned away by the heat of the chase. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the hunter. The next 3 days were a blur of legal maneuvering and digital excavation. I hired a shark of a lawyer, a woman named Reynolds who listened to my story with a look of predatory delight. We filed affidavits, contested the debts, and formally cooperated with the district attorney's office. But Patricia wasn't idle. On Tuesday, I received an email from my firm's HR department. Someone had filed an anonymous ethics complaint against me, alleging that I was using company resources for personal gain and that I was involved in a money laundering scheme with my brother. It was sloppy, riddled with spelling errors, and obviously Patricia. But it was enough to trigger an internal review. I had to sit down with my boss, a man I respected immensely, and explain that my own mother was trying to sabotage my career to blackmail me into dropping charges. "I believe you, Megan," he said, looking at the police report I provided. "But this is messy. We deal with sensitive client data. Until this is resolved, I have to restrict your access to the Tier 1 accounts." It was a slap in the face. She had managed to tarnish the one thing that was entirely mine, my professional reputation. That night, the rage I felt was different. It wasn't hot, it was cold and calcified. "She wants a war," I said to Christopher over dinner. "Fine, I'm going to nuke the site." I went back to the $15,000 gap, the mystery transfer. It had gone to an LLC called Willow Creek Holdings. It sounded generic, innocent. I ran the address. It came back to a residential home in a neighboring state. I ran the ownership records of the property. It belonged to a woman named Beatrice Kitteridge. The name sounded familiar. I dug through my childhood memories. Beatrice? Aunt B? No, not an aunt. A friend of my grandmother S. An elderly woman who used to send me $5 and a card for my birthday. I pulled up Beatrice's obituary. She had passed away 6 months ago. My stomach turned. I accessed the probate records for Beatrice's estate. The executor was listed as Patricia Vance. The pieces clicked together with a sickening snap. Patricia had been the executor of her friend's estate. The $15,000 hadn't been sent to Willow Creek Holdings. It had been siphoned from the estate into the shell company, and then moved into Ryan's account to cover a gambling loss before the fraud against me even started. But here was the kicker. The shell company, Willow Creek Holdings, had been set up using my name as the registered agent 2 years ago. They hadn't just started using my identity 8 months ago. They had been using me as a shield for years. If the estate theft was discovered, it would look like I had stolen the money from the dead woman. I felt like vomiting. This wasn't just desperation, this was a premeditated setup. They had built a trapdoor under me years in advance, just in case they needed a fall goo. "Why?" "Christopher," I called out, my voice trembling, "pack a bag." "Where are we going?" "To the nursing home where Beatrice lived. I need to talk to the administrator. I need to see the visitor logs and the financial records she might have left behind." "Is this it?" Christopher asked, seeing the look in my eyes. "This is it," I said. "This proves she's not just an accomplice. It proves she's the mastermind. She's been grooming me to take the fall for her crimes since I got my CPA license." We drove 3 hours the next day. The nursing home administrator was hesitant at first, but when I showed her my credentials and hinted at an active police investigation regarding elder abuse and financial exploitation, she opened the books. There it was. Checks written from Beatrice's account, signed with a shaky hand that was clearly guided by someone else. And in the visitor logs, for the last 6 months of Beatrice's life, the only visitor listed was Patricia Vance. I took photos of everything. I recorded a statement from the administrator confirming that Patricia handled all of Beatrice's finances. On the drive back, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan, a call from the jail. I accepted it. "Meg," his voice was small, broken. "Mom said you're ruining everything. She said you're working with the cops to frame us. I'm not framing anyone, Ryan, I said, staring out at the passing highway. I'm just turning on the lights, and you guys are the cockroaches scattering. Please, he sobbed. I can't stay here. It's awful. Just pay the bail. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll testify against Mom. Just get me out. I paused, the golden child, ready to sell out the mother who destroyed herself for him. It was poetic in a dark, twisted way. You'll testify? I asked. Yes, I swear. She made me do it, Meg. She set up the accounts. She told me to practice your signature. She said you owed us because you were rich and we were struggling. It was all her idea. Tell that to Detective Miller, I said. I'll let him know you're ready to talk. Wait so you'll pay the bail. No, Ryan, I said softly. I'm not paying a dime, but if you talk, maybe the judge will give you 3 years instead of 10. I hung up. I had the records from the nursing home. I had the trace on the gambling funds. And now, I had Ryan ready to flip on Patricia to save his own skin. I had everything I needed. But there was one final act left to play. Patricia had called a family emergency meeting at my Aunt Sarah's house for that evening. She had invited everyone, aunts, uncles, cousins. She was planning to launch her smear campaign to paint me as the villain before the legal news broke. She wanted a public forum. Fine, I would give her one. I looked at Christopher. Change of plans. We're not going home. We're going to Aunt Sarah's. Are you sure? Christopher asked. It's going to be a bloodbath. I clutched the folder containing the nursing home records and the bank fraud evidence. I'm counting on it, I said. Aunt Sarah's house was a shrine to the 1990s. Floral wallpaper, thick beige carpets, and an overwhelming scent of potpourri that always made my nose itch. Usually, it was a place of comfort, a neutral ground for Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas exchanges. Tonight, however, the driveway was packed with cars. My uncle's truck, my cousin's sedan, and right in the center, Patricia's car. The windows of the house were glowing with warm yellow light, looking deceptively inviting. Christopher killed the engine. The silence in our car was heavy, charged with the static electricity of what we were about to do. You ready? He asked, his hand resting on the door handle. Once we go in there, there's no coming back. This is the nuclear option. I looked down at the thick accordion folder in my lap. It contained bank statements, the affidavit from the nursing home, copies of the forged checks, and the transcript of Ryan's confession from the jail call. It was a heavy, physical manifestation of my mother's betrayal. She's already in there lying to them, I said, my voice steady. She's poisoning the well. If I don't go in there and cap it, I'll never have a family again. Then let's go, Christopher said. We walked up the path. I didn't knock. I had a key, a spare Aunt Sarah had given me years ago when I helped her organize her estate planning. I unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The sound of Patricia's voice drifted from the living room. She was in full performance mode. And I just don't understand how she could be so cold, Patricia was saying, her voice thick with manufactured tears. Ryan is rotting in that cell, scared for his life, and Megan, she just hung up on me. She said she didn't care if he died. She has all that money, that big bonus she bragged about, and she wouldn't spare a cent to save her own brother. There was a murmur of sympathetic noises from the family. That's just not right, you. Uncle Bob grumbled. Family helps family. I know, Patricia sobbed. I failed her. I must have failed her as a mother to raise someone so heartless. And now, she's threatening to make up lies to the police just to keep her money. She's going to testify against us, Sarah. She's going to send Ryan to prison to save a few dollars. I stepped into the archway of the living room. I'm not sending him to prison to save money, Mom, I announced, my voice cutting through the room like a jagged knife. I'm sending him to prison because he committed 14 counts of felony fraud. And so did you. The room went dead silent. Every head turned. Aunt Sarah, sitting in her armchair, looked from Patricia to me with wide, alarmed eyes. Uncle Bob stood up, looking uncomfortable. Patricia froze, her handkerchief hovering halfway to her face. Megan, Patricia said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. We were just discussing. I heard what you were discussing, I interrupted, walking into the center of the room. Christopher stood by the door, a silent sentinel, ensuring no one could leave without passing him. You were discussing how I'm the villain because I won't pay the $20,000 bail. You abandoned your brother, Patricia shrieked, standing up to regain dominance. You have the means and you refused, you are letting him suffer. I refused, I said, stepping closer to the coffee table, because I had already paid $84,000 without my consent. I dropped the folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy, authoritative thud that made the porcelain figurines on the mantel rattle. What is this? Aunt Sarah asked, reaching for her glasses. That, I said, pointing a finger at the pile, is the paper trail. Uncle Bob, you said family helps family? Take a look. Look at the loan application for Vance Ventures. Look at the signature. That is not my handwriting. That is a forgery. Patricia lunged forward to grab the papers, but I was faster. I slammed my hand down on the folder. Don't touch it, I snapped. These are copies. The originals are with the district attorney. I opened the folder and began spreading the documents out like I was dealing a hand of poker. Here is the credit report showing 3 credit cards opened in my name, I narrated, looking around the room at my stunned relatives. Here are the statements. Patricia told you Ryan needed money for a business deal. Look at the charges. Lux Auto Leasing, Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, https://www.google.com/search q=pokerstars.com. I picked up the statement highlighting the gambling transfers. November 14th. While you were all at Thanksgiving dinner listening to Mom talk about how hard things were, she was wiring $12,000 of my credit to an offshore casino account for Ryan. The room was silent. Uncle Bob picked up a paper, squinting at it. This says $12,000. It's a mistake, Patricia yelled, her face turning a mottled red. Ryan has a gambling problem. It's an illness. We were trying to help him manage it. We borrowed the money to pay off loan sharks who were threatening him. We were saving his life. By stealing my life, I countered. You didn't ask me, Mom. You stole my identity. You forged a driver's license. I pulled out the photocopy of the fake ID. Look at this. That's my name. That's Mom's address. And that's a photo of me from 10 years ago. Aunt Sarah gasped, Patricia, did you make this? I had to, Patricia screamed, backing away. You don't understand. They were going to hurt him. Megan wouldn't help. She never helps. She thinks she's better than us with her fancy degree and her city apartment. I worked for everything I have, I yelled back. I didn't steal it, but that's not even the worst part. I took a deep breath. This was the blow that would end it. I could almost forgive the money you stole from me, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I could almost write it off as you being a desperate mother protecting a screw-up son. But then I found the gap. The missing $15,000. Patricia's face went white. All the color drained out of her, leaving her looking like a wax figure. Don't, she whispered. Megan, please. Who is Beatrice Kitteridge? I asked the room. Aunt Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. B, my sister B, your grandmother's best friend. Yes, I said. Aunt B, who passed away 6 months ago in the nursing home, who left Patricia as the executor of her estate. I pulled out the final document, the transfer from the estate account to the shell company and the visitor logs. Patricia didn't just steal from me, I said, looking directly at Aunt Sarah. She looted Aunt B's estate. She siphoned $15,000 intended for B's funeral costs and outstanding medical bills and funneled it into a shell company under my name to hide the theft. She stole from a dead woman. She stole from her best friend. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the Silink. E of a vacuum, where all the air had been sucked out. Aunt Sarah stood up slowly. She was trembling. She looked at the paper I held out to her. She looked at the signature on the check, the shaky, guided hand of her dying sister. She looked at Patricia. You told me, Sarah's voice broke. You told me there was no money left in B's estate. You told me we had to have a closed casket because we couldn't afford the service she wanted. You made us bury her in that cheap pine box. Patricia was shaking her head frantically. Sarah, no, it was invested. I was trying to grow the money so we could give her a monument later. It was a bridge loan. You spent it on online poker, I said ruthlessly. And you used my name to do it so that if anyone checked, I would go to jail for elder abuse. Aunt Sarah walked up to Patricia. Sarah was a small woman, frail and bird-like, but in that moment she looked 10 feet tall. Get out, Sarah whispered. Sarah, please, she's twisting everything. Get out, Aunt Sarah screamed, a sound so raw and full of pain that it made everyone jump. You stole from B, you let us bury her like a pauper while you gambled away her life savings. Get out of my house. Get out before I kill you myself. Uncle Bob stepped forward, grabbing Patricia's arm. I think you need to leave, Pat. Get off me, Patricia shrugged him off, looking wild-eyed. She looked around the room, searching for an ally for someone to manipulate. But there was no one. The disgust was palpable. Her mask had not just slipped, it had shattered. She turned her venom on me. You happy now? She hissed, her face inches from mine. You destroyed your family. You put your brother in a cage and your mother on the street. I hope you're satisfied. I didn't destroy the family, Mom, I said, looking her dead in the eye. I just protected the parts of it that are still worth saving. You are dead to me, she spat. Good, I replied. Then you can stop trying to borrow money from me. She stormed out, the front door slamming so hard the windows rattled. For a long time, nobody moved. Then, Aunt Sarah collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her hands, sobbing for her sister. I walked over and knelt beside her, placing a hand on her knee. I'm sorry, Aunt Sarah, I whispered. I'm so sorry I had to do this here. She looked up, her eyes red, and cupped my face. No, Megan, you didn't do this. She did. You just showed us the truth. I looked over at Christopher. He gave me a small, sad nod. The war was over. We had won, but looking at the wreckage of my family, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a survival. The fallout was swift, brutal, and thoroughly bureaucratic. Patricia was arrested the next morning. Aunt Sarah had called the police regarding the theft from the estate, and combined with my evidence of identity theft and fraud, the district attorney didn't hesitate. They picked her up at her house while she was trying to pack her car, presumably to run. The next few months were a blur of depositions, court hearings, and meetings with lawyers. Ryan, true to his nature, crumbled immediately. Confronted with the evidence of the wire fraud and the fake ID, he took a plea deal. He allocated full blame to Patricia for the orchestration of the scheme, claiming he was coerced and manipulated, which was partially true, but didn't excuse his willingness to participate. Because he cooperated, and because he was a first-time felony offender, he got a reduced sentence. 5 years in minimum security, with eligibility for parole in 3. Patricia, however, had no one to trade. She had no leverage. She was the architect. I sat in the back of the courtroom on the day of her sentencing. I didn't want to be there, but I needed to see it finished. I needed the period at the end of the sentence. Patricia looked older. The jail jumpsuit washed her out, and without her makeup and hair done, she looked small and defeated. But when she turned and saw me in the gallery, her eyes still held that spark of malicious defiance. She didn't look sorry. She just looked angry that she had lost. The judge was unsparing. He cited the sophistication of the fraud, the victimization of her own daughter, and, most damningly, the exploitation of a vulnerable elderly person's estate. Ms. Vance, the judge intoned, looking down over his spectacles. You preyed on the people who should have been able to trust you most. You cannibalized your own family for greed. That is a betrayal that the court views with extreme severity. She was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and embezzlement. As the bailiff led her away, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just walked out, leaving the wreckage of her life behind her. It took me almost a year to clean up the financial mess. I had to spend thousands on legal fees to get the Vance Ventures debt discharged. I had to dispute DIT inquiries, close accounts, and monitor my identity like a hawk. My credit score took a hit, but with my documentation of the fraud, I was able to slowly rebuild it. My firm cleared me of any wrongdoing after a thorough internal audit. In fact, the senior partners were impressed by how I had tracked the funds myself. They promoted me to a lead investigator role 6 months later. But the biggest change wasn't financial or professional. It was the quiet. One evening, about 14 months after that night at Aunt Sarah's, Christopher and I were sitting on the balcony of our new house, the one we had finally bought after the dust settled. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange. I had my phone on the table. It was a new number. Patricia didn't have it. Ryan didn't have it. "You okay?" Christopher asked, handing me a glass of wine. I took a sip, looking out at the tree line. I was just thinking about Aunt Sarah. She sounded good on the phone today. She's finally getting the headstone for Aunt B installed next week, the one she wanted. "We should go visit," Christopher said. "We will," I smiled. "But not yet, I think. I just want to enjoy the peace for a little longer." I thought about the years I had spent trying to buy their love, trying to be the good daughter while they drained me dry. I thought about the guilt that had been programmed into me since birth, the idea that saying no was a sin. I realized now that no wasn't a rejection. It was a boundary. It was the wall that kept the castle safe. I had lost a mother and a brother, yes, but looking at Christopher and looking at the life we were building, a life based on honesty, respect, and actual love, I knew I hadn't really lost anything. I had simply surgically removed a tumor that had been killing me for decades. I took a deep breath of the cool evening air. It tasted like freedom. "I'm okay," I said, and for the first time in my life, I meant it completely. I'm finally free.